All right, welcome to ATW Live. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
All right, so the night is here. It's the official Kamala Harris, Donald Trump debate, debacle extravaganza. It's the drinking game, so I got a gigantic thing full of Modelo beers here. And look, I'm not going to try to force the humor of this thing. I'm just going to let it come to me tonight.
Okay, Matt,
Too many rules, but
I hear
whatever.
apprehension in your voice. I actually do. I'm like,
Yeah.
rarely do you have this sort of muted, apprehensive quality.
Well, I'm a little intimidated by the scale of this event, frankly.
As an event or as a drinking game.
Oh, sorry. Can everybody hear me?
Can anybody hear me? Last night they couldn't hear me.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay.
Here's mine. Here's mine. An entire giant-sized French press.
Oh, nice.
The blackest Robusto coffee.
Maybe you'll have a stroke in the middle of the event. That'll be excellent.
Well, every once in a while I go and actually watch this thing after we've taped it, and I realized last night I was on the edge of a manic break. So,
really?
Well, not for any real medical reason, just because I've been writing a lot and haven't been sleeping well and drank a lot of coffee. And it's overstimulating. So
right.
Tonight.
Well, now you can downshift and unwind by watching this political train wreck. And I'm gonna rely on all the commenters to tell me when we've hit a trigger on some of these rules. I wrote too many because last time there weren't enough. But
you really did. I mean, I think we should give people the option of ignoring a few of the rules
course.
if they wish. They can sort of pick from the menu.
But I've noticed what happens with these is that you think you're getting, you're absolutely oversaturating the game with rules, and then what they end up sneaking in between all of them, and then there's always one line that they say 5,000 times, and that's what gets people blasted. But all right, well, we've got a few minutes before this thing starts. We're going to switch to C-SPAN probably when that happens. But do you want to listen into Gavin Newsom, see what their talking points are right now?
Sure.
All right, let's see.
That should be complemented. I think at the same time, it should beg the question of the flip-flop flip as it relates to abortion of Donald Trump, the flip on marijuana policy, on TikTok, on the fact that Donald Trump himself campaigned to say reduce the national debt and increase
we have to say something about the miniature
$4 trillion. So
podium?
I think both candidates
I didn't know
are
about
subject to review of the rhetoric versus the record. But I don't see it as a negative. I honestly see Harris in the context of those issues as a positive.
I'm going to mute this for a second.
And as a sign of a mature leader.
A mature leader. I think we
Hey,
heard
Governor, it's Dana Bash.
So, see, you can see it here.
Yeah.
Look on the right there. So this is the Axios story.
Okay.
That I'm going to read from. Harris to have shorter debate podium than Trump's. Vice President Harris will have a shorter podium than Donald Trump during Tuesday night's debate. A person familiar with the matter told Axios in ABC News video.
Rather than standing on a stool.
Yes.
Okay.
This is normal, and both campaigns were given visibility about the different podium sizes. A person familiar with the matter told Axios a Trump campaign official mocked Harris for using a smaller podium, telling Axios that it looks like the kids' table at Thanksgiving. Yeah, by the numbers. Trump says he's 6'3". Harris says she's 5'4". I think he's overestimating by an inch and she by 2.
Well, men overestimate their inches.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say this. Psychologically, I'd rather be standing on a stool than be knowing I was in a miniature situation. I mean, that's an illusion for the audience, but for the person doing it, it's real.
Yeah, it brought to mind the Spinal Tap Stonehenge for me immediately. We have a
or the Joe Biden tiny desk incident of last week.
What was that all about?
Well,
was
they
the
had
tiny desk
Joe.
thing for?
They had Joe signing on a not very persuasive set that said White House, but obviously was either in the former bowling alley of the White House or a broom closet. He had a minder who I guess I didn't know, who was very concerned about him and helped him get up and so on. And the desk itself looked like something from, when I used to be on the road a lot for this show and I'd stay in a Motel 8. It's the kind of desk they give you there.
Right. Right. Yep. I saw the picture of it, but I didn't understand why they would do that to him. Why not get him a real desk?
Some people saying that he's insisting in a frustrating way on being president still. Like, don't I have to sign something today? So they whipped up an office for him and had him do it, even though the other big office is occupied by the coup plotters.
That is so, Walter. That screenplay writes itself.
I know. A guy who still thinks he's president, and they've got to convince him and keep him thinking it.
It's like Reverse Dave or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, the real president has to go out and they have to create situations that makes him think he's actually still president.
And then we end up on the verge of war, and even though he's 3/4 gone, he does have this little residual bit of wisdom. And he, in a kind of being their way, he says something gnomic, like, Russians are like trees. And somebody thinks and goes, oh my God, he's talking about Trisapov. Get General Trisapov on the phone. And that's his last act before he succumbs to complete twilight of the mind. He saves the world.
Dmitry
Trisapov.
Oh man, that makes me sad. Now I'm remembering James Earl Jones dying.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because remember he was in the bomber there with Slim Pickens.
He was.
Yeah.
Did they just give Gavin the mic and let him take over the coverage?
Yeah. What is this all about? Why is he on? Just like
to remind you that there's somebody to come in should she malfunction. See, this is the whole Democratic strategy now. They always introduce you to the 3 people that will take over if the main one becomes malfunctional.
Right. Yeah. This is like it's like an episode
watching.
Of Survivor,
and he's talking about his grievances that somehow now he even won California. This is
Jake Tapper put his glasses on Newsom, and Newsom combed his hair a little less Patrick Bateman style. They could be identical.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, Anderson.
Thanks very much.
He's Marcus
less than
Halberstram.
14 minutes away from this debate. One of the most
have the same haircut.
Consequential debates.
Oh, no. He has Jake has a
probably in
slightly
any
better
presidential
haircut.
race, certainly in my lifetime.
I should have worn my damn
proud
glasses.
of Kamala Harris. I voted for Kamala Harris when she was a district attorney. I voted for her when she was attorney general. I voted for her for vice president. I'm going to vote for her for president. And I think we should just take a minute. She doesn't like to talk about the history. She doesn't want to go there, but I don't mind going there. This is a black woman.
What history?
An Indian American woman who is going to be standing next to Donald Trump. It's down to 2.
MSNBC is going minimal.
It's down to 2. It's down to 2.
And I'm excited to see what she does. And I think everything that Gavin said is true. This guy is losing it. The fizz is coming out of the soda with Donald Trump. It's time to turn the page. She's gonna do it tonight.
I don't want to hype this up, but it is just extraordinary. I mean, we were all together at that last debate.
Yeah.
By the way, you said that the last debate. I know, but
and it was true.
We were all thinking, oh, this is going to be a really consequential debate, but we had no idea. It was. But
well, get ready for round 2, Anderson, because Walter Kern predicts.
There's no telling what is going to happen in 13 minutes.
Well, you're dealing with a wildly unpredictable actor in Donald Trump.
They're doing a minute-by-minute countdown. This is like a
in any way going to majorly go off
Saturn
the rails.
rocket launch in the 60s.
To what she rehearsed. But this is also a historic night for other reasons. I hope this isn't what she litigates tonight strategically.
Well, no,
they'll
start 10 minutes later so that they can,
has
people who tune in can hear some of their pre-spin.
And he is 8 weeks away from potentially being president-elect of the United States. That's also a historic context that lingers.
It will be interesting, though, if you said she's going to stick with what she rehearsed and not go off the rails.
Just to take care of some housekeeping. I mentioned the mystery rule in the text.
I forget what it was.
Well, I didn't say what it was, but my mystery rule is that basically if either of the candidates say something that's between the lines threatening, or like if Trump alludes to, let's say,
Like
drinking or liquid, no, not life threatening, like, you know, if he starts talking about somebody who maybe is an alcoholic, or, you know, hinting at some problem that they don't want to.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. And if she
slanderous double entendres.
Slanderous double entendre. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like the subtextual threat raised to the surface. I have a feeling that might happen in this debate, but we'll see.
I also have a private rule, because you can't see where I am. As I told you last night, I'm in a wilderness cabin in Montana. Out the picture window directly behind my computer is a field where bears often graze. Did you know they graze? Well, they do.
They do?
Yeah. Well, they graze on bugs and grubs, and they turn rocks over. Earlier in the season, when the grubs are out, they've usually raked them clean by now. But I had a lamb chop that went bad, and in my refrigerator while I was gone. And so I threw it out into the field in front of me. And some predator will appear during.
That's excellent.
It could be an eagle. If it's an eagle, Trump wins. If it's a bear, I'm not sure.
I like that form of prognostication. It's very like sort of Colbert Report when it was still funny, right?
Oh, you know, this is the former Crow Indian Reservation where, you know, do a land acknowledgement, and it's true. It's true. So any auspicious appearance of an animal comes straight from the source, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm kind of weird that way. So I'll keep you posted.
All right, I'm gonna move to C-SPAN.
Why?
Wait.
To make sure it works.
Yes. Well, let's take a look just quickly at what MSNBC is doing.
Anderson Cooper has that sucked on a lemon thing all these days.
Yeah.
I guess it's his way of looking objective.
Latest promises from the campaign trail. Quote, Trump threatens to jail adversaries.
Well, this was a big headline this morning. Yeah.
Oh my God.
The Trump
my feed is 7 minutes behind.
Quote, Trump rants, resurfaces sexual assault allegations for 49 unfocused minutes.
Dude, they did this so people like us can't.
Translation service for Trump's recent totally incoherent remarks on child.
I have simultaneous
train of thought as it derails on a child care question. This was the New York Times today, which has otherwise been, I think, aggravatingly.
Oh no, she was just about to accuse the New York Times of.
Yeah, I think I might have. I need to. Here we go. All right, am I right? Am I on the correct?
I oriented myself around, if they're showing him, it must be good for Trump. We shouldn't be platforming him because of the nexus between domestic violent extremism and what Christopher Wray called domestic terrorism after January
1 minute 44.
When they stopped airing him, I personally re-examined broadcasting him unedited and live in real time because I thought, what do they, now that I know their worldview and their political and business aims from Dominion, what are they not showing us?
Also, I mean, we just went through the experiment where we elected a person of advanced age into the presidency, and like we all know the presidency.
Oh, Chris just came up with this point.
That guy with the nuclear codes in 4 years is just an obviously insane thing.
This is a rule violation.
Never had nuclear codes to begin with.
Oh no,
the nuclear codes.
The person we're seeing right now, with the most powerful military on earth and the nuclear codes. 4 years from now, after being president for 4 years,
but that wasn't
Jen. What are we doing here?
They're trying to get as many of her points in before the debate as they can.
What it means to be putting country before party, putting country before self-interest, and being realistic about the limitations imposed by the job that's incredibly high pressure, and that does age even young people who have that job.
Okay, let's move to the simulcast because we
young people have had it recently.
All right, here we go.
Continue to trend down. So
order showing that small changes in their polling model, North Carolina moves from a small lead from the former president to a tie, while Pennsylvania tightens a bit with a few close, high-quality polls. Beyond that, not much movement going into tonight's
Have you noticed the
debate.
hate for
So there are
Nate
the swing
Silver?
states and Washington Post.
Well, he's kind of, gone off the reservation, hasn't he? He isn't properly
people, the candidates,
enthused.
the voters, the media will all be looking at the polls.
Tweeting out polls that are not favorable.
Ernest in Georgia, Democratic caller.
Exactly. They've got so many now that they can pick a bouquet every time they do it. They can pick the 3 prettiest polls
what do you want to
from
hear from the candidates tonight?
Right.
I would like
group.
to hear how ex-president apologized for January the 6th.
Oh, Lord.
Even though he feels that what he did.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. The ABC debate is beginning. We'll take you there now.
Okay, Matt.
Meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied.
Oh, believe me, I have the window cracked.
Key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play.
Oh, right here in Pennsylvania. That was always the rule during my primary debates. The right here and whatever.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face.
Dude, that Willie Brown thing is amazing.
It is.
The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Look at that camera angle.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away.
Would have gotten us drunk already.
Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
Ooh, well, anything could happen. An intimate setting. They've never met. Maybe they'll like each other. You never know.
So let's now welcome
that would be the most repugnant thing.
Dude, what if they fell in love?
President Donald Trump.
I mean, they've never met. There's no telling. This is a Hollywood cute meet.
Kamala Harris.
Let's have a good debate.
Have fun. Thank you.
Oh, weird.
Fun.
Welcome to you both.
It's weird. It's like an NFL game where you can hear the huddle.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambitions, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. Right. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children.
Buy a car seat.
My passion. One of them is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
Let's
My
start
opponent,
one,
on the
Matt.
other hand, his plan,
Because we will be off this thing if she gets
which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires
We're going to be
and big
droned
corporations,
during the show.
which will
We're going to be
result
going
in
into
$5
hardware.
trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists
Sales
have
tax
said
was in there.
that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year
It's going to be a
because
long night.
of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China.
That's a drink.
In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few
moving
years
too much in the
ago.
shots.
This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics. And
That was
also
gonna be a
unions.
rule, but I
Unions are
didn't
gonna
do
be
She's
it.
doing
affected
too
very
much
soon.
of the
and you see what's happening. You see what's
eye roll
happening with
stuff.
towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous.
Yeah,
They're at the highest level of
that's
criminality.
kind of a rule for.
And we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us
COVID.
the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe
I didn't
very
put that in the
strongly
rules,
that
but
the
Project
American people
2025.
want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will
I
give
think
you
that's in there somewhere.
Number one, I
President
have
for all
nothing to
Americans.
do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died. Has there been anything like it? We did a phenomenal job.
I would say
with
they're
the
both kind of
pandemic.
on their
We
games.
handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators.
Her reaction
world.
shots
We got
are
gowns,
not
we
going to
got
wear
masks,
well.
We did
I
things
can
that
tell you
nobody
that right
thought
now.
possible.
There's too much of it.
And people give me
Never
credit for
anything like
rebuilding
it.
the
That's
military.
a
They
drink.
give me credit for a
All
lot
her
of things,
sort of,
but not enough
writing
credit for the
something
great job we
down
did with the
and
pandemic.
narrowing her
But the only
eyes,
jobs they got
shaking her
were bounce
head.
back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
Mary, just drink.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his
I thought you just said he had
it's all about
2025.
tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy.
Drink.
And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy
Goldman
worse.
Sachs?
Mine would
Yep.
strengthen the economy.
Talk
What
about
the Wharton
inversion.
School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no
She just
plan for
quoted-
you because he is more interested in defending himself
Okay,
than he
yeah,
is in
that's-
looking out for you.
Yeah.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up
spot
your
run.
tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your
First
plan
humor
is
of the
what she
debate.
calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as
Drink.
you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now
That is
under
true.
their administration. We are going to take in billions
She's
of dollars.
shaking her head as though
hundreds
it's
of
not.
billions of dollars. I had no
What is she shaking
inflation,
her head
virtually
about?
no inflation. They had the highest inflation.
Somebody
per
taught
capita
her
in
to
history
try
of
to
our country
dominate the
because I've never
reaction
seen a
shot
worse period
window.
of time.
And it's,
People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon
for me,
or eggs
not
or
gonna
anything
work.
else.
Oh.
The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Nice.
Well, let's be clear that the Trump
Drink.
administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve
Said
and
chips like
modernize their
Andrew.
Can you
military.
put a link on Twitter to
Basically
us?
sold us out
Hmm?
when
Can
a
you put a
policy
link to,
about
on
China
Twitter
should
for our
be in
thing
making
right now?
sure the United States of America wins the competition
mean?
for
It's
the
not on?
21st century.
I don't know.
which
Amanda's
means
telling me that
focusing
no one
on
can
the
find
details
Hang
of
on a
what that
second.
requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President
Whoa.
First of all, they bought their chips from
What'd she
Taiwan.
say?
We hardly make chips anymore because of
She blamed China for COVID and said Trump had been soft on them. The man who said the China virus.
No policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look
she's
at what
really
she's
overdoing
done to
it.
our country,
Look at now she's got her hand under her
millions
chin.
and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe,
folks, I don't know why
21
we're not
million
on
people,
Twitter
not the 15 that people say. And I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history.
Oh,
then
God,
last month, you
an
said that
issue with
your
my
administration
Twitter
would be
account.
great for women and their reproductive
wouldn't you know,
rights.
Matt?
In your home state of
Wouldn't
Florida,
you
you
know?
surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote,
Send it over to
"I'm gonna
me
be
and I'll
voting
put it
for
on
no
we're gonna do that.
more than 6 weeks." But then the very
see how
next
mine
day, you
works.
reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did
Walter,
that, because that
you send me a link
predominates,
and I'll put it
because
on
they're
mine.
radical. The Democrats are
You
radical.
gotta send
in that.
Emily.
And her
you gotta
vice
send her your
presidential
login
pick, which I think was a
information.
horrible pick, by the way, for our country.
I don't have it.
Because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion
can't you
in the
send me in
9th
a
month
text
is
message?
absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the
God, this is
exceptions for
ridiculous.
rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of
Okay.
Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important.
I'm going to
But
get
we
you
were
my
able to get
wife's
it,
and then we're
and
going
now
to retweet
states
it.
are voting on it.
Okay.
And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. And now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral.
Well, this is a drag, but whatever. Let's just keep plowing through it.
Their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans.
All right, Walter.
So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women.
Didn't he just come out and say that he was for
jobs, who
IVF?
can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts,
something's going on with Twitter. We don't know what it is.
2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader.
Does that trigger one of our rules?
They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an
All
issue
right, we
that's
missed
important
that
to
whole
Republicans,
thing.
Democrats,
I heard
across
it
the
all.
board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and
because
your
he only cares
desires.
about himself, so that's drink.
And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War
political
III,
debates
just to
to
go
go.
to
It's
another
pretty highly
subject.
charged.
What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
He came prepped
Again,
with that.
Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Great.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually
That was
have
a
the
mistake.
endorsement
What?
of 200 Republicans
To make
who have
an
formally
issue out of
worked
that,
with
and whether
President
it's
Bush,
true or not.
Mitt Romney, and John
Because
McCain,
if it can be demonstrated
including the
as true,
endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the
Touting the-
inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this
Aren't
election.
you president?
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal.
This has got a little bit of like Hagler-Hearns quality to it.
You call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You
back
say
and
you
forth.
would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local
we have
police.
pinchy hands.
How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
why do they keep fact-checking him?
They were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear, where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the
for
page
him, not for her.
on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies.
Well, I guess
Someone
that's
who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that
to get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss
I didn't put that in the
one of the,
rules.
at least every point
Values.
that you've made. But in particular,
Yeah.
let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will
Drink.
not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a
Middle
hardworking
class.
mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed
I think people are
$400
noticing
million
how much
on
they're
a
helping
silver
her, by
platter
the
and
way.
then filed bankruptcy 6 times.
Yeah.
Is
I
a
mean,
value
not
that I
just
bring
our-
to my
our
work to
comments,
say
but-
we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value
C-SPAN
that is
question.
deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not
Scammers.
changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true
Is that
measure of
supposed to
the
be
leader
like a memorable
is
line?
Why does she
leader
keep
who
accusing
actually
her of
understands
him
that
of
strength
name
is
calling
not in
when he
beating
hasn't done
people
it
down,
yet?
it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
What was
She went
that?
out in Minnesota and wanted to
He
let
called her on
criminals
all her
that killed
mugging and
people,
her,
that
you
burned
know,
down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal
See, that
aliens
they
that
could
are in
easily
prison.
fact check,
This is a
but
radical
they
left
didn't.
liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out.
Some of the comments are amazing.
Coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling
it's a
your
total
supporters to
gang
go
up.
home.
I mean, it's becoming a total gang
about
up.
what you did on that day.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
Yeah, that's kind of a drink.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by
this
others.
is interesting because this is going to end up being a referendum on how much people trust
or soldiers. They
all the
rejected me.
institutions,
Nancy
right?
Pelosi rejected
she's
me. It
putting
was
up
just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying
mainstream case.
she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond.
He said no.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate.
Anti-Semitic?
And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia The president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back.
Well, there's going to be
It's
some
time to turn
energetic
the
declarations
page.
of victory after
And
this
if
is
that was a
over.
bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point.
Drink.
Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
They won't fact check that.
Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Drink.
She knows she can say anything, basically.
It was a different term.
It's kind of
and it
a
was a
free
term that related to energy because they have destroyed
kick
our
for
energy
her every
business.
time.
That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad. It's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let sign a bill to close the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed. Those people are killing many people, unlike
Trump
J6.
needs to alter
We talked
his
immigration
register a
tonight.
little
I do
bit.
want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide.
Well, it's a prosecution, but it's by Mueller. That's the part I didn't
you lost by a
anticipate.
whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it. That
So
you
I've
came
never
up a
met this
little
guy.
bit
You met
short.
this guy?
I said that.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite
What in
make
the
it.
hell?
And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know
Dude.
this, you and your allies, 60 cases.
Okay,
Many
this is
judges,
over the
many of
top
them
No
now.
judge
Republican,
looked at it.
and said
They
they
said
still
we
won.
didn't
It's
have
over the
standing.
top now.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality.
Wh-
Can you
why is it
imagine
his
a
job to
system where a person
declare that
in
he
an
didn't
election
detect
doesn't have
sarcasm?
standing? The
And
president
also
of the
just
United
all the
States
Russia
doesn't have
gate shit and
standing.
everything.
That's
Like
how we
they're
lost.
just gonna
If you look at the facts, and
not
I'd love
acknowledge
to
any
have
of
you,
that
if you
stuff.
do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll
Truth
show
in our
you
time.
Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what?
It's
That
both
doesn't
ends against
matter,
the middle.
because we have
Trump
to
is
solve the
obviously
problem that we
on the
have right now.
defensive.
That's old news. And the problem that
but
we have right
why
now
wouldn't he be
is
when
we
they're
have
making
a
accusations?
nation in decline, and they have put it into decline.
We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose.
He did say he said it. He exactly quoted himself as saying it, but said he was joking.
But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term.
Oh no! Now he's handing her a layup.
Campaign's top lawyers responded saying, "We won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote." Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million
when you give the whole argument and then you say yes or no.
He is having a very difficult time processing that.
Well, look.
But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held. Americans.
I'm going to look like a horror movie villain because of my lighting.
Israel has a right to defend itself.
It got dark in front of me.
It matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians.
Walter, if the audience is like me,
months ago, now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead.
Focus on your
Nearly
face
100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the
stalemate. It's dark, Walters,
how would you do it?
I need those
let's understand how
laser eyes.
On October 7th, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know
this really brings
is
into
that
relief for me
this
how
war must end.
How much the media
end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal, and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
He's not so drunk that he can't put that
Trump,
comment up.
Negotiate with Netanyahu
That's self-awareness.
and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza.
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now.
So
And
he's
I've been
doing
pretty
that
good at
now.
predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own
Sorority
way,
line is good,
she
though.
hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different
He's got to mix
spheres
it up
of terror.
emotionally.
And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well,
He's not
actually.
going to.
They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're
It's
spreading
interesting
that
that
money around.
the incumbent
Look at what's happening
is not
with the
being,
Houthis
you know,
and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the
put
Middle
on,
East. This would have never happened.
you know,
I will
put
get
on
that
the
settled
defensive.
and fast,
Yeah,
and I'll
it's
get
very
the
weird.
war with Ukraine and
It's
Russia
as though she's
ended.
running against
If I'm
President Trump,
president-elect, I'll get it done
who's president now.
before even
Well, no, I
becoming
mean,
president.
This is the brilliance of sub-subbing out Biden.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself.
I'm sorry.
It is well known.
I don't think he ate any
that he
amphetamines.
said
He
of
doesn't
Putin
have the lively
that he
sort
can
of.
do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant.
This is that law
It is
school
well
thing
known
where
he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And
you
it is
deliver a phrase and you
absolutely
just keep
well known
repeating it all over,
that these
over and over again.
dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to
You know how
be
they
president
teach, like,
again because they're so clear.
grade school kids to repeat
They
your
can
topic sentence in the
manipulate
last
you
in the last
with
paragraph?
flattery and favors.
It's that kind of
And
rhetoric.
that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me
finger
you are a
pointing.
disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline
and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe, because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia.
Walter, do you think the audience will understand if Matt Taibbi goes to get a bathroom break right now?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. I'll sum up. You know,
The ABC News
you go vomit,
presidential debate
and
will continue after this.
I'll handle this. So I'm going to look at people's comments here as we go. I wish Matt had turned off the sound, but
the House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45
he's been playing a drinking
years of
game.
Congress like no other.
Okay.
Since
My feeling so
1979
far
has
is
been your
this:
primary source for
Donald
Capitol
Trump
Hill,
is trying to
providing balanced, unfiltered
escape a
coverage of
pincer
government,
action
taking you to where the
between
policy is
Muir,
debated and
particularly.
decided,
I think
all
he's
with the
been
support of
appointed
America's cable companies.
as the
C-SPAN,
prosecutorial
45 years and counting,
interviewer,
powered by
and
cable.
Harris, whose job is to look alarmed, amused,
Friday nights. Watch
and,
C-SPAN's 2024
sort of,
campaign trail, a weekly roundup of
condescendingly,
C-SPAN's campaign coverage, providing
unhappy.
a one-stop shop to discover what the
It's
candidates
trapped
across
him
the
in
country
a sort
are
of
saying to
monologue of
voters, along with
self-defense.
first-hand accounts from political reporters.
But it would be
updated
hard
phone
to
numbers,
imagine what else he
fundraising
would
data,
do
and
in this
campaign ads.
situation.
Watch C-SPAN's 2024 campaign trail.
So
Friday nights
it's a little bit
at
like two
7:30
debates
p.m.
in the sense
on
that she
C-SPAN,
has a
online
free
at c-span.org, or
reign. She has
download
free
us
reign to
podcasts
sort of
on
repeat her
C-SPAN now,
talking
our
points
free
and make
mobile
her
app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
campaign
C-SPAN, your
statements.
unfiltered
And
view of
he
politics.
is asked to answer for all kinds of things from the past, from years before the last few.
As the 2024
I don't think
presidential
that they've
campaign
asked
continues,
anything
American
substantive
History
of
TV
her that
presents
has
a
been
new
at all
9-part
damaging
series,
to the
Historic
Biden
presidential elections.
administration.
Learn about the pivotal issues of different eras. Uncover what made these elections.
That was like the peeing scene in Naked Gun. I'm sorry.
I had to speak over the commercials.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, right. Well,
so what's your take so far? I have a lot of thoughts about this.
Well, I mean, I basically said it's a pincer action. Muir has, is obviously the hired gun here. They haven't asked questions of her that are all injurious. They haven't said, inflation went up like this far, during your. See, the questions they ask her are statements followed by a "would you like to expand" type question.
Right.
The questions they ask him are prosecutorial, and they ask him to defend statements and, specifically come back from their charges.
Right.
Yeah, and I think somebody just said something interesting. We don't have any details on her policies. It's all been about Donald Trump. It is the prosecution of Donald Trump. That's what we're seeing. But it's in a slightly different form than I anticipated. I didn't expect that they would be quite so brazen in their cooperation with her.
Well, I wonder how that's going to play. I mean, they're going to.
I think so far it's pretty obvious what's going to go on. It's going to be pretty much as I said on Twitter. There are going to be a lot of, we saw the prosecutor and we saw the leader. I think they, put Donald Trump in the dock tonight and found him guilty, that kind of thing.
Yep, there's going to be a lot of that. Yeah. And look, I've seen her so many times, or not so many times. I've probably seen her half dozen times in person. And she's all over the map. Sometimes she's absolutely a mess in person. And we've seen it even with the taped interview. But this, I mean, she's relatively speaking on her game in this debate. I mean, she's not been challenged. No, she hasn't been challenged, but she's
Trump can't challenge her.
She's not, puking into her soup either, right? Like, which does happen with her.
No.
But we
I see the bait. I mean, there's the basis for a declaration of victory. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
Trump looked nervous. Trump was on the defensive. Trump, at times lost his temper, etc.
But I'm not sure how this is going to play. Like they might misread how all this is going to play. This looks like a setup.
Well, one thing that Trump has done, obviously, is say the country is in dire straits. There are these problems. They're awful. They have yet to make it seem to her that her administration has been anything but successful.
Right.
first time. You're watching C-SPAN's live coverage of the ABC News presidential debate simulcast.
Constitution Center in Philadelphia,
No,
Pennsylvania.
I get that she's getting softball questions, but I've seen her screw up even softball questions.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate.
Muir is an actor. I mean, his act tonight is transparent to me.
Into this conflict, Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration.
He's a dickish
that we
Ivy
must
League
defend
sort of
Ukraine from
know-it-all.
Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said,
that was a typical question from Muir, where he asked him how he'd end the war, but he also asked him to endorse a Ukrainian victory, which, you know, is not
we're in for
a negotiated ending.
275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to
fighting
stop
back.
him. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
It's a great question. How come he has to ask that?
Like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get
How
it
can he
done.
answer that when he's asking him
Negotiate a
how he's going to
deal,
do a
because we
peace
have
settlement?
to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
It's hard not to laugh at the idea
First
of
of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Yeah, because you fucking
I believe
cheated.
the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about
So
how
what's
he could
interesting
defend
is
himself.
they've got him in the
Days
middle.
later, I went to
You know,
NATO's
as far as the
eastern flank,
staging goes, if
to
you want to look
Poland
at this
and
as a
Romania.
drama,
And through the work
he's
that I and
caught
others
between
did, we
them,
brought
and
50 countries together to support
if he
Ukraine
were where
in
she is
its
standing,
righteous defense.
it would be a different vibe
And because
altogether.
of our support,
Yeah, but
because
I
of
think
the
they're-
air
I think-
defense,
I
the
think they misread
ammunition, the
who-
artillery,
how this
the
is gonna play
javelins, the
in Middle
Abrams
America.
tanks
This
that we
looks
have
like a
provided,
setup
Ukraine
to
stands
me.
as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. and understand what that would mean. Because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up
I should have put that in.
for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Well, he should have asked her if there should be a negotiated
and he
settlement.
Wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should.
She can't answer it.
As a leader, upholding international rules.
That's a non-answer answer. I didn't.
So a movie person I know, sort of a TV producer, movie producer, technical person, says her hair is glued to her head on one side, and she obviously has an earpiece.
Our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of
on the right
caring
side
about
of her head.
democracy. And that is very much what is at stake.
Well, that's going to start a
The President of the United States is commander-in-chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the
that was
first
the first
hour of
time
this
she
debate.
really
I want to move on to Afghanistan.
I think.
Said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was
By the
one
way,
of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you.
She was sent to the Munich Security Conference 3 days before the invasion.
And we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol
They
Hill.
didn't
Our
deny it.
soldiers who died
She
in the
just
chaotic
went into
withdrawal
some
from
rhetorical
Afghanistan. I do
thing
want to ask
about
the Vice
America
President,
and its strength
do you
and so
believe you
on.
bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I
tough
agreed
question.
with President Biden's
First tough
decision
question.
to pull out of Afghanistan.
It's only
4
10-18.
presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not
endless war?
one
What? That
member of
wasn't
the
your fault?
United
What are you
States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest
What did
deals
you mean
can
by that?
imagine.
The
He calls
U.S.
himself a
Navy's
deal
in the
maker. Even his national security
Middle
advisor
East
said it was a
in
weak,
in
terrible deal. And
unusual
here's how it
numbers.
went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we
Clinton brought Yasser Arafat there.
Respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the president
What are the
of
Camp
the
David
United
Accords
States
then? And
to be commander in
The
chief
role
with
and the
a level
responsibility of America
respect.
to
And
ignore
this
the
gets back
other
to
sides
the
of the
point of how he
negotiating
has
situation?
consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold
So she's weak on foreign
and the
policy.
respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice
she's
President
being
Harris, thank you. President Trump's
spokesperson
response to
for
her saying that you
the
began the
military
negotiations with the
industrial
Taliban.
complex. I think that's accurate.
If you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the
Come
worst
on.
withdrawal. And
This
in my
Muir thing is
opinion,
getting
the most
ridiculous. Like
embarrassing moment in the
I
history
usually
of our
try to give
country.
these guys
And
a
by
little
the
bit of
way,
a break
that's why
because it's a tough
Russia
job, but
attacked
come on,
Ukraine,
man.
because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you
For
recently
those
said of
who
Vice
like
President
her,
Harris, quote,
these
"I didn't know she was
reaction
black
shots
until a number
are
of
going
years
to be
ago
red meat.
when
For
she
those
happened
who
to turn
don't,
black,
they're going to
and now
loathe
she
her.
wants to be known as black."
Yeah.
I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm
I don't
asking.
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times
What is she talking
calling
about?
for the execution of
this is the
young
Central Park Five.
Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park Five, took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time.
So I'm just sort of recreationally drinking now if the people are bored at this point.
Can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country. And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Time's up.
No, there was a Great Depression.
Briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans.
They're both tired now.
And let's compare the
They're
plans.
both repeating themselves.
I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing
she does this thing where it's
what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering.
She repeats the same phrase over and over again.
$25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home
buyers. First-year law school summation.
That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a plan to not allow fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay,
that's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond because the former president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace.
What's interesting is that, and somebody brought this up, she's belittling him far more than he is her, really.
Quote,
I mean,
unless we can do something much better.
He's belittling her
Last month, he said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan?
It's been an attack on his person.
Can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care. Always was. It's not very good today. And what I
barely even noticed
we
that
come up
Lindsay's
with something,
in this
and we
debate.
are working on things. We're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just
Okay, what's he talking about?
I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away.
She's a gun owner?
So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies.
So she's running from Bernie Sanders, but she's running
I don't have
to
to tell the people watching tonight. You
John
remember what that was
McCain
like?
and Dick Cheney.
Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege.
Well, I'm going to start stocking up on
Ibogaine
if she's going to be president for 4 years.
The Affordable Care Act, not
what do you hope it will do for you?
In terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of.
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular.
It'll be interesting to see the time measurements. I think they're lopsided in her favor.
We have to have clean air
in
and
terms
clean
of speaking
water.
time.
Vice President Harris, you call climate change
I'm also
an
interested
existential threat.
the
question
Mueller
to you both
versus
tonight is,
Davis
what
time.
would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion.
I'm calling
in
it
a
the
clean
spare
energy
shot.
Economy,
This is
while we have
sometimes
also
happens in a drinking game where you
increased
just gotta
domestic gas production
Take a shot because
to historic levels.
you just
we
need
have
one.
created
Okay.
over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up
comments are coming in so fast I can't
closing
even
them like happened under
get them
Donald Trump.
accurately.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you.
We'll talk over the bilge, but I have a lot to say afterwards. Don't worry.
It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money
almost
from
2
Ukraine.
hours already.
They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million?
Somebody wants to know what ate the lamb
This is
chop.
a crooked administration.
It's too dark to see now. I can only see my reflection. But I will tell you that there was a beast of some kind lurking in the grass. It might have been a cub,
This ABC
a
News
bear
presidential
cub.
debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
I'm going to run again.
Okay, I'm going to handle it. I'm going to take your comments into account here.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
So there are two styles going on here. Kamala is
The House will be in order.
pretty pleased.
C-SPAN
Once again, Matt
celebrates
left the
45
sound
years
on.
of covering Congress like no other.
Pretty pleased with herself.
Since
She's
1979,
being
we've been your primary
somewhat
source
indulged,
for
I
Capitol Hill,
think.
providing
Less so than in the
balanced,
first
unfiltered
part.
coverage of government, taking you to where the policies
Trump
debated
seems
and
to
decided,
be a
all
little bit of a
support
town
America's
crier
cable
tonight.
companies.
He's basically
C-SPAN,
driving
45
home
years
one
and counting.
point over
Powered
and
by
over.
cable.
Things are bad. They're going to get worse. Don't believe her. They throw it back to her, and
Friday
she
nights, watch C-SPAN's 2024 campaign
creates a
trail,
souffle
weekly
of,
roundup of
sort
C-SPAN's
of happy
campaign
talk
coverage, providing a
and
one-stop
attacks
shop
on
to discover
him
what the
and,
candidates across the country are saying
rather
to voters,
vague policy,
along with first-hand accounts from political reporters, updated
So,
poll numbers.
I think it
fundraising
depends on your
data, and
priors. If you
campaign
think the
ads.
country's going in
Watch
the right
C-SPAN's
direction,
2024
well,
campaign trail,
you know,
Friday
you'll
nights
stick with her.
at 7:30 p.m.
If you think he's telling
on
the truth
C-SPAN,
about the
online at
situation,
cspan.org, or download as a podcast on C-SPAN.
Oh, sorry, man.
our
Sorry.
free mobile
you'll
app,
find
or wherever you
him
get your
in the sort of Paul Revere "I'm warning you" role. That's the role he's playing.
Who? David Muir?
No. Trump's Paul Revere. He's saying, you know, they're coming. The bad times are coming.
Right.
You know, don't believe the happy talk. Look at the situation on the ground, and she's sort of resorting to principles of morality and talking points and generalistic statements about someone told her that the optimistic person wins, and so she's taking that.
Well, that's
angle.
Normally the case, but he can't play that card because they're not making her defend this administration's record.
Here's a strong difference. He believes what he's saying. It's clear.
Right.
He whether he's right to believe it or not.
Point. Yep.
Whether he's right to believe it or not, we'll set aside. But he believes it, and he believes it's urgent. She is playing something more like a political game, and depending on how America feels about things, whether or not they want a sort of politically normal or set of candidates or somebody to save them.
Well, I think the question that's going to come out of this, because the conventional,
is it over?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Damn thing's been going on forever. Let's check in with my wife on Twitter.
Hang on a second.
Okay, I'm not allowed to say what you're saying.
No, it's still we got ads in the other channels, so.
Yeah, Trump is in a strange sense the captive of the urgency that he feels about the country. He can't moderate and modulate his emotion and affect in the same way, because he is convinced, like I say, rightly or wrongly, that we're at the edge of a crisis or in one, whereas she is sanguine about things, is suggesting that things are going really quite well. They've accomplished a lot.
She's actually doing the act that Trump gets accused of all the time, which is just saying whatever shit works.
Right. And how this is going to be spun afterwards and how it's going to be received by those who actually watched it is going to be different.
Yeah. I mean, the post game, I can already hear the post wrap commentary. You already nailed it there. She delivered a knockout blow. It's decisive. Final summation.
But it'll be hard for them to substantiate that without just piling on Trump as a person, because I don't know how they'll suggest that she created a knockout.
For our live simulcast of the ABC News presidential debate. A reminder, we'll open the phone lines as the debate ends to get your reaction.
They'll talk about style a lot, and they'll talk about Trump's demeanor.
Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country.
Oh, that's a drink.
One that is focused on the future.
Different visions.
And the other that is focused on the past. And
Yep.
an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And
Trump didn't take advantage of the sort of DEI affirmative action
the dreams,
angle,
the hopes,
the reverse
the
racism point,
of
which
the
I thought he
American people,
might.
which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors,
No,
what we can
new
do
families.
that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together. That
Why do
is
we have to
about
bring down the cost
sustaining
of living
America's standing in
if
the
you're in
world
office?
and
Well,
ensuring that
apparently
we
Joe
have
won't
the
listen to her.
respect
She's
that
got
we
good
so
ideas,
rightly
and he just
deserve,
won't do them or
including
something.
respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a
Did you say
prosecutor. I
reproductive
was
freedom?
a DA, I was an attorney
started
general,
as a
United
prosecutor.
States senator, and
Yeah,
now
that's a
vice
drink.
president. I've only had one client. the people.
Mhm.
And I'll
Kamala,
tell you,
for
as a
the people.
prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now.
Vomit.
Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American.
I mean, is this like a global?
She plans to be around for 4 terms. If that was Trump, they'd
So
say.
she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that. And within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have
that got us last time
with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching.
So
here in
an
the US,
earpiece
all over
debate
the world, and from all of
has
us
broken
here at
out.
ABC News.
Has it?
Both of his ears are visible. Only one of hers was. Her hair on the right side never moved.
Okay, there's the spin
And
room.
that concludes the ABC presidential
So I'm gonna
debate.
go.
Okay,
To
let's go to
CNN.
that. Well, let's do something funny. Let's go to Fox.
Oh shit!
Can we? I mean, we know what MSNBC is going to say.
Well, I want to hear it though. I want to hear. I want to hear the David Axelrod.
But I want to see if Trump's own side is somehow upset with him.
Hang on a sec.
Well, his.
I gotta get it. I gotta get it arranged. Hang on a second.
So that was the only debate we're going to have, remember, except the vice presidential debate, which is coming.
Oh, wait, are we lost?
I don't know. You're on PBS right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Cares about them, and she has a
Here we
plan
go.
for them. And over baiting Donald Trump into talking about crowd sizes and court cases and Nancy Pelosi and Russiagate and grievance. And he took the bait almost every time, if not every time. He cited Fox.
Those were the questions from the moderators.
Invoked Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban as a character witness. It was like a 4chan post come to life.
Here we go.
He really
the legal
took her bait
stuff.
almost every time. Yeah. If you're a fisherman, as I struggle to be, you would be lucky to have your
well, we didn't know
so often. Instead of focusing on Trump filling in the blanks for those voters unfamiliar with her, he focused on stuff as if he was the incumbent. I'm not sure Harris necessarily did enough to fill in the blanks that undecided voters might have about specifics about her plans, but there's no question Democrats have to feel good tonight about the trade of Biden for Harris, who showed herself to be a strong candidate. She delivered a strong message. And yes, she prosecuted the case against Trump. She started the debate.
There you
She began
go.
the debate approaching Donald Trump, shaking his hand at the podium, kind of forcing him to shake her hand, introducing herself. And from that moment on, Dana, she took the fight right to him.
Oh, God.
I'm just looking up. This is the quote that I think really sums up what Kamala Harris
Did
her whole
tonight.
message was tonight. You're not running against Joe Biden. You're running against me. It was obviously a planned line, but it deftly explains how she kind of triangulated and she separated herself, obviously, from Donald Trump and where she needed to from Joe Biden. And what was so fascinating is that she didn't do it on defense. She did it on offense. Really, in every turn, there are real weaknesses in the Biden-Harris administration, from the economy to immigration to Afghanistan. Just take Afghanistan for an example. Instead of talking about the disastrous, chaotic withdrawal, she turned it to the fact that he invited the Taliban to Camp David and talked
And then he started talking about Abdul.
And, exactly. And then you mentioned that she was baiting him. She baited him, and he took the bait every single time, as you said. She was also using the language that he usually uses. She kind of stole it from him. Disgrace, weak, things like that really get to him. The other thing that I just want to add is that she began to turn to who she is by saying,
Well, I can't
Sorry,
hear.
hang on a sec.
I'm going to read the comments here. Such finesse and nuance from Kamala tonight.
She did so well that she may feel like, why bother? And he did so badly, he may not want another debate.
Oh, boy.
But it actually would be in his interest because he's the one who came out on the short end of tonight's stick. I mean, the idea that, he's talking about
This is Juan, their most liberal commentator.
And the moderators to say that's just not true. I mean, it's pretty shocking. But he ended up, and I think this is the biggest tell for if this was a poker game. Guess who turned red-faced and looked like he was having to just hold it in? That was Donald Trump. He was the loser tonight.
Hold it in?
In 2020, he had a terrible first debate, and he had a great second debate, and I don't know that he's going to get a second chance.
Well, we'll see. He and his team may feel like it was a great night tonight. It may depend all on your perspective, how your respective candidate did tonight. We always love to hear from you on the socials and otherwise.
He did mention she was the border czar.
Much. That wraps our coverage for tonight. We'll have much more analysis on Sunday on Fox News.
Fox
Sunday.
is wrapping already, so let's go to. I mean, we gotta. Let's just go to MSNBC quickly.
Okay.
Hang on a sec.
This has been a Fox News special presentation.
Hang on one second here.
Somebody said, how did they get through the whole debate without talking about the strange circumstances that led to her being there, which is a good point.
Oh, God, Lawrence, hang on a second.
Well, you and I can talk, man.
Wait, no, I'm going to put it up. Hang on a sec. Lawrence is rambling right now.
In 2 hours, I wasn't responsible for security.
Can you hear that?
Another thing you isolated where he said that Democrats and everyone wanted Roe versus Wade overturned. Here's the problem with that lie. That's the worst lie of the night because he was lying to the voters about the voters.
Yeah.
He was lying about you, and you know it.
Yeah.
More than 60% of the country is sitting there saying, he's lying about me.
So I had a rule in there about
didn't want
tumescence
Roe
from
overturned.
Brian
I'm a Democrat, I'm an
Stelter,
independent.
but
I didn't
I
want
think
Roe
Lawrence counts,
overturned.
doesn't it?
He actually lied.
No talk about free speech, which is the most important thing on the ballot. I noticed that.
I think the moment that the debate went completely sideways for Donald Trump
Okay, all
was
right.
the moment when
just can't.
Vice President Harris was very smart about saying I'm the only person. This was an answer about immigration. David Moore asked
Can we just
about
wait for the legal metaphor?
illegal border crossings. We knew that question was coming, that they were going to talk about that, talking about it reaching a record high, numbers have dropped, blah, blah, blah. She says, I'm the only person on this stage who's prosecuted transnational gangs, trafficking drugs and human beings. She talks about that bill that was on the table that Donald Trump called Republicans and said, don't vote for because he wanted the issue, but he didn't want to solve the problem. He just wanted the issue for the election. And then she did what I think is the smartest thing of the night. And it is the thing that we got from Hillary Clinton that she was being advised to do. Get him with the one thing that will completely destabilize him for the rest of the debate. And it did. And you named it before. It's when he said, essentially, she said that we need a leader who focuses on solutions. He's going to talk about immigration when it's not even the subject, because he kept going back to the billions of people and they're all criminals.
Okay.
He kept doing it. And she called him on it. And she said, note that he's going to talk about immigration when it's.
So that's the Bukkake Hour on MSNBC.
So Matt, I'm so damn sober. I'm soberer than I was when we started because of my coffee consumption tonight.
I'm jealous.
I have some things to say. They don't put me on CNN or MSNBC. I'll be serious for a second. Yeah, you know, on her side, it's a setup in the sense that she did have a helpful moderator, more than helpful, in Muir. She does have on 2 out of 3 cable channels people who are prepared to go with the prosecutorial metaphor and so on. Trump was in fact on the defensive because he was under attack. To say he took the bait is, I don't know, interesting. Is he not to, if he hadn't taken the debate, they would say he, avoided answering the questions, avoided the challenges that were put before him. Both played to their bases, but Trump also played to a sense of urgency across the country. He was someone who was saying, we've got a real problem. We've got difficulties. We've got to deal with them. She's bullshitting
And they've
you.
been in office.
And she's bullshitting you. And she's been in office and she's had plenty of time. And she was doing a more standard mixture of uplift, personal attacks, and campaign rhetoric. Trump really didn't use rhetoric at any point. He used the word MAGA a couple times, but it was basically crisis talk, which she portrayed as negativity. She didn't use the word joy. So for the people who watched coming out of it, you have to decide whether or not you sort of want another politician, or you think we're in a situation which demands what Donald Trump says he does, which is get things done, negotiate deals, be tough, stand up. And the immigration thing was a thread that ran through the whole thing. And she avoided it, basically. And the question is, does America care about it? Polls show that they do. So in a traditional sense, she did very well. In a contextual sense, it depends on what you think about what's going on out there. Is it going to be Paul Revere who's sounding the alarm, we've got to save this country, or is it going to be talk about opportunity and vision and not going back and so on?
So this is the era that a lot of us got into with 2016. You're not making an error. I'm sorry. I just want to make clear. You saw the rabid excitement on MSNBC and CNN because they think they've got this thing sewed up, because everybody saw what a strong performance she delivered. Jake Tapper, is talking himself into this being a great fishing trip for Kamala Harris somehow. But in 2016, we saw that some of the messaging that Hillary Clinton put out and that the media was fawning over was received very differently by the population than the sort of knowledge class thought, right? And as you say, Walter, he was fighting the entire time. He was clearly the target of these moderators. They were hostile to him in a way that the Tapper was not in the last debate, which may have played may have hurt him this time, but how is that going to play to the rest of America, right? And this whole idea that she didn't have to answer for this current administration because they swapped her out at the last moment for the incumbent.
Well, it has freed her to play a double game. She can claim to be new to the situation because technically she is, but she can also wrap herself in the mantle of sort of normalcy or non-radicalism, the Biden rhetoric, basically. One thing, she was a little Obama-esque, I think. That was the note she was trying to strike. And Donald Trump was basically saying, listen, you got rid of me, things got worse. Look, things are worse, you got rid of me. I'm trying to come back at the last hour. I think things can still be saved. Had I been president, we wouldn't be in this situation. And you're going to give me a chance to do that? Or are you going to carry on with this bad trend? So in terms of drama, having to be the kind of town crier, having to, be a Jeremiah, a warning of things, is not an appealing TV situation, but it might be appealing to people who agree with you. She proved that she's a better politician, I think, tonight than people suspected.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I feel a little taken in by that interview that she did with Dana Bash.
Yeah, there might have been some rope-a-dope,
right? Because that she looked like she had sniffed glue before that performance, and here she was, like a lawyer. I mean, like kind of I would say a middling lawyer, right? But still very lawyerly throughout the entire, event. She got through it, and she had set the bar so low, and
But it was the trial of Donald Trump in every way tonight, and that's what we saw. And even in the commentary, the friendly commentary from the more liberal cable channels, they talked about her demeanor and the sort of debate tricks involved. Oh, he took the bait and so on. This was where she was strong sounding and so on. But I don't think anybody who watched it tonight knows a damn thing about what she's going to do. She denied a lot of things, but she never put forward anything except for a tax cut and somehow building homes.
So here's the DNC talking points for this morning. Daily talking points. They sent out this newsletter. Oh, sorry. That's here it is. Two very different visions. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He proudly overturned Roe, guardrails, right? Criminal acts.
Now, okay, so stop for a second.
Mm-hmm.
The fact checking and the sort of hostility of Muir got to a point where it was almost unprecedented in my experience of debates. He didn't press her on what she might do about the border in the future. He, in a lot of ways, the hardest question was about the Afghanistan withdrawal. But
and even that, they kind of gave her an out a couple of times in that. But go ahead,
Yeah. I got the sense that she was sort of at her party headquarters, whereas Trump had wandered onto hostile territory and was trying to make an urgent case under fire. And as I say, the staging of the thing was such that he really was put in the middle. She was looking at him the whole time. He didn't really turn his head toward her many times, but she pointed, and she really did act prosecutorial. It was set up as a courtroom with Donald Trump in the middle between the judge and the prosecutor. And as a former playwright, I can tell you that's a very powerful influence on things.
Well, that whole line that she ran about how I'm not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump, that they let her kind of get away with that. That Trump let her get away with that. That the moderators let her get away with that. I mean, she's running as the continuation of an administration, but she's presenting as a new fresh face. That's a very difficult thing to overcome. Like, one of the reasons why Hillary lost in 2016 is because she ran as the insider, right, representing kind of the political establishment, and Harris didn't do that. She wasn't forced to do that.
I think a lot of how you receive this debate is what you feel about Barack Obama, because this is sort of a rerun of that. It's as though Trump is running against Obama again. Do you think that that's a time you wish would return, or do you think of that as a turning point when things started going poorly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was somebody who was very excited about Barack Obama when he first got elected, and as his administration progressed, and especially the kind of adoption of all the war on terror machinery that Dick Cheney had set up. I mean, the disappointment was very real for me. Like, as a Democrat at that time, I thought, wow, I really got conned by this whole thing. And then the Wall Street stuff, it really came home when she brought up Goldman Sachs, sort of endorsing her candidacy. It's like, wow, we're so distant now from 2008, 2009 that you can do that, right? And
well, Hillary was pretty close. Hillary was pretty close to them too.
That's true. You're right. Yeah.
But let's just go quickly through substance. On war and peace, I don't know what she had to say except we need a two-state solution, and for some reason she made it seem that the war in Ukraine would be going worse if Donald Trump had been president, even though it didn't start until he left. So that was a kind of strange thought experiment that didn't reveal much. I thought she was weakest on foreign policy. On the economy, she had nothing to say. She was going to give a tax credit and create an opportunity economy.
Yeah, but he didn't corner her there enough.
No, he didn't corner her. Trump, as I say, was taking the posture of someone who's saying, the British are coming. This immigration thing's a disaster. The rest, he also talked about nuclear war, which she didn't even address. He could talk about World War III and Russia being a nuclear power and remind us of the dangers of that. And it went right over her head. I mean, she wasn't going to get in there at all on that. So there was no danger on her part of seeming alarmist, because those things which I think are legitimately concerning to America don't seem to register with her.
Yeah, what he needed to do something like define inflation. How does inflation work? What causes inflation? Do you know? Like that was the kind of question that needed to be asked. Like,
no questioning of her by him really happened. I mean, he did return fire on some things, but she was not held to account for the Biden administration by the moderators. They ran on the assumption, they worked on the assumption that she's not Biden, she's not responsible, and only once in the Afghan case did they try to hold her responsible. But I thought the question that really summed up the attitude of the moderators was asking him if he wanted Ukraine to win or not.
Oh my God!
But then asking him how he would solve it. So they were basically suggesting that if
you want to solve it, you're against the right thing.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Right.
If you want to solve it, then you don't want Ukraine to win.
Right. Walter, before this week, you talked about how the biggest winner in this whole political debacle that we're in the middle of is the NFL.
Yes.
And the metaphor that kept popping into my mind as I was watching Harris was, okay, as a politician, the operation is clean. She's getting out of the huddle. There aren't 12 men in the field every time she has to say something. there's no illegal formations, or the stuff that suggests an uncoachable or a badly coached team, right? She which was all over the place in that last interview, she was just a mess, right? In that Dana Bash interview. Here she got through it. She got through the whole thing cleanly, right? And that is going to be celebrated as a virtuoso performance by most of the opinion pages. And we just have to see whether that has the same effect as it did in 2020, or whether it's different like in 2016.
Well, so I have a thesis about this entire election, which I've articulated on America This Week a few times, but maybe not succinctly. It's really an election in which reality and feelings, or sort of political spirit, are the two opponents. She's still running a kind of civil rights will go forward. It's a progressive world. We won't go back. Hate is the worst thing about America. Bigotry is the worst thing about America. She kept talking about everything we have in common and so on. And then there's the question of, can I pay my mortgage? Can my kid buy a house? Why is, I had a guy write me today from Salt Lake City. I think he's a Democrat. I'm pretty sure he is. His wife is. And he said, on my walk today, I saw a guy who got hit by a car, and I saw a guy kneeling on the railroad tracks trying to kill himself on my little walk today. Now, as I go around, because I'm a fiction writer and I love to sort of see into the real world, I see a country where people are living in their cars at levels that I have never seen before. Mm-hmm. There are a few motels in my town that have sort of closed down, and those parking lots fill up at night.
Oh yeah, like the sort of Motel 6 type places.
Yeah.
I've
but
seen
but
that
they
whole
don't. But
thing,
they don't fill up because they're going to stay in the rooms. They're using the parking lot to sleep in their cars. So depending on your experience of America, we are either in a crisis or everything's pretty damn good. So I think it was a class divide that will decide what you think tonight. If you're comfortable, and you're the traditional Democratic voter, you're a lawyer and you've got a good job and so on, it's all the way with Kamala. If you are hovering, despite all her invocation of being for small business, because small business is in terrible shape, you don't appreciate being shined on at all. And if you walk the streets or drive or have the experience of the middle class and working class experience, it's a pretty negative one now.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to see how it plays. I think you're right. I already know how this is going to play with everybody I know who has money. Right. They're going to love this.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right?
This is great. This is great reassurance to the people who are doing well in America, because they see that she's a supple politician, that she's able to invoke the usual liberal themes. They also see her willing to talk about the most lethal military and so on, because she knows when to swing right,
Right.
And she does it fairly often, actually. Prosecutor, Law and Order. Well, when they fact checked him on crime statistics, which is a sticky wicket that nobody can get into and Donald Trump can't explain. When they fact-checked him on whether the city manager of Springfield, Ohio, had seen any reports of pets being eaten and so on, they alienated some people, for sure. Because, as I say, the experience of the not winning Americans is not good now. And it's so different. And she didn't win. All those people that Waltz is supposed to appeal to were alienated tonight.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to see how all this plays. I was a little bit surprised that, because my expectations of her were so low, but partly because they lowered them. So we,
she did much better than I expected. For sure. Yeah. I'm the one who said it was going to be a debacle. I really thought it was going to turn into, circular, long, tautological sentences. She filled in with a lot of, icing. She did use a lot of more rhetoric, I think, than he did.
But it just underscores that she's such a mystery as a human being to me, because I've seen her make no sense at all in public.
Right.
And then she comes out like this, and she's, like as I say, she's like a lawyer you wouldn't be sorry to have represent you in court. I mean, I wouldn't say she's a great one, right? But
the question is, do you think Donald Trump is telling the truth? If you think he's telling the truth about the country, then his manner seems appropriate to the kind of alarm and urgency that, he's talking about with his words. If you think things are pretty good, then you're relieved that somebody who can kind of give speeches and speak more eloquently and dodge and weave and fill in with rhetoric is your candidate. In other words, I think the Democrats are relieved that this is their candidate, but those who are in Pennsylvania, in Western Pennsylvania, where the last steel plant is about to close, and Pittsburgh and so on, may not appreciate it.
Yep. I think that's basically right. It's as this Ultra Chase 513 says, it is a Rorschach test, and it's kind of actually a fascinating political situation, because the overwhelming mainstream response is going to be, that was awesome. Oh my God, I can't believe how great that was. But that's really a referendum on how you feel about how things are going right now.
But you see, there are no Trump voters. There are no Trump voters who care what those people say. Okay,
right.
They've lost them all. But it is reassuring to the MSNBC person that they don't have a turkey in her.
Right, yeah. Or as John Madden would say, a turducken.
The question is, does she peel off swing voters from Trump with this performance?
Well, come on. I mean, the whole thing, I'm a gun owner. Could you imagine her saying that in the primary in 2019?
I wanted David to say, which kind of gun?
Yeah, exactly. What is it? Is it a Glock? I don't know. That was funny. But very interesting. I mean, look, they plowed through the talking points in the first 30 minutes, and then after that, they were kind of just shouting at each other. And she hung in there.
But Trump didn't shout at her. Trump stayed face forward. Even though he didn't say you and address the audience as the people the way she did explicitly, I think what he was trying to say is, I got this guy over here, I got her over here, and we're in trouble, okay? Listen to me. I'm telling you the truth. I've been there before. Don't believe this, and
don't believe the hype.
Yeah, don't believe the hype.
Yeah, so that's going to be fascinating, right? Because...
And I remember, and the one case of this that I remember specifically from the last 8 years is after his acceptance speech at the RNC in 2016. It was universally panned as dystopian, dark, sinister. Yeah. And I saw it myself. I won't tell you what state of mind I was in. Let's say I was in a heightened state of mind. And I thought, this doesn't shine like a convention speech. It doesn't have any of the usual rhetorical flourishes or big billowing optimistic ideas. But it feels like somebody's telling the truth. And I thought, how important is that anymore? As they see it. Maybe not the truth as things are, but as they see it.
Right. And what 2016 taught me, because I made a mistake there. I mean, I was very unimpressed with that speech, because I had seen Trump on the stump, and I thought it departed from this kind of like cheerfully bombastic character that he played on the stump. It was very like symphonic and negative, I thought, in the speech.
How about the weird moment though, where she told people to go to his rallies?
Yeah, that was weird, because his rallies are huge, by the way. But whatever. But just quickly, I realized in 2016 that I had been taught as a campaign reporter to look out for stuff that actually doesn't matter to winning and losing elections. Like we're trained to look for things like, does this person perform well on the stump? Do they they sound like they're in control of themselves, right? So candidates like Barack Obama get very high ratings from campaign reporters, but also sort of Marco Rubio and all these candidates who don't do well, and its sincerity actually does well, even if it's a little bit like off kilter, like Trump sometimes is.
Well, and here's the thing, Matt. In 2016, he was able to run as Cassandra. He was able to say, things are bad, I'm going to make them better. He couldn't run like that in 2020 because he was running as the incumbent. But now, again, he has the chance to say things are bad and I'm going to fix them. The opportunity he didn't have, he would have been running against himself.
Right.
It worked the first time. And the second time it didn't work. The second time he didn't have access to that emotion. And I see people on the right or in the comments going, he's angry. But the angry Trump won. And
he
the
was
Trump
also
that
more
was
focused tonight.
Yes. And the other Trump didn't win.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays. I can already hear the op-eds tomorrow, but
Well, we're in the business, Matt.
It's just going to be
I try to
coming over and over again.
Yeah. But you see, I try to be the guy who forgets I'm in the business. As much as it's fun to deconstruct the inside press side of the story, I really do try to be reality-based and see things from the point of view of those who are motivated to vote. Because people who are motivated to vote by two things. They are usually fear.
Right.
Fear that the good thing will be lost that's going on, or fear that a bad thing will happen and they need to be saved. And and that really is what gets people to vote.
Yep.
And I don't know that she allayed any fear except the fear that maybe she's stupid.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. Well, that was really interesting. And look, that was only a 6-pack, and I'm kind of down for the count, which tells me I'm getting old. So, but thanks everybody for hanging out. And Walter, that was awesome. And thanks to everybody who came in from Twitter. We ended up having a pretty huge crowd tonight, so that was cool. And we'll see you again later this week. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I'm going to go out in the morning and see if that lamb chop has been eaten by a bear. People who weren't with us at the very beginning won't know that joke, but
no, we have to find out what predator ate that. Yeah. You need to have one of those like motion activated cameras that detects. Excuse me.
Okay, Matt.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you in the end of the week, and talk to you soon.